We have now been, for a little over a year, we've been at that 8 to 10% benchmark. If we go to the next page, Sarah, looking at exam applications. And this Yep. And on this one, the top chart is how we're doing so far in the current biennium, which started in July of 2025. And then, Sarah, if you can kind of see what you can show of both of those charts, what you have here for comparison is all of the prior biennium. But for the same period, you can see the bar charts that are stacked up. And what this shows so far is that we are trending slightly above the applications that were received in the last biennium, but we're generally showing the same seasonality as far as months. And of course, that's impacted by when cohorts graduate. And then on the next page, you see the same information for endorsement. Endorsement is showing a similar pattern, but you'll see that the numbers are slightly below what they've been historically. Part of that is probably the choice of choosing a compact privilege, where before in the past, folks would get a full Oregon license. But something to monitor, even the pattern's the same, but the total numbers are lower. The next section, we go into a little bit more detail. We've had these reports for a couple of meetings available to you now, but it shows you the first map are individuals who are purchasing a compact privilege to practice into Oregon. And you see both the rendering on the map and then the tabular data below. Washington State, unsurprisingly, continues to be the top source, if you will, for compact privilege holders. And those are folks that I think are generally based and might work both sides of the border. Whereas folks that are more of the traditional traveler, Texas is our number 2. They have a very large volume of available licensees, and a lot of the temp staffing companies are based out of Texas. So you can see that. And then if you go to the next map, Sarah, bottom of the next page, this view is also very interesting from the standpoint of Oregon licensees who purchase compact privileges into other states. And again, Washington, the largest target there, probably being driven by demographics. But interestingly, more Oregon licensees are purchasing privileges to practice into Washington than Washington licensees are purchasing into Oregon. And that is a benefit that this board, by participating in the compact, is providing that benefit to Oregon licensees, that they have flexibility to make use of these compact privileges. And this gives you a sense of where they're going and how they're using that. For more detail, I won't go into a lot. Since your last report, there's some of the cumulative reporting that we've done on compact privileges year over year. 2025 did see a little bit of a drop off, but 2026 is starting. Scroll down just a touch there, yeah. And you'll see some composition of that, but 2026 appears to be trending back to the original trend line, even though 2025 was a little bit below. And then we had Nevada and Kansas are the states, and we have one individual from each of these states that has now purchased into Oregon. Next section of the report around investigations. This is the information on the number of open cases presenting to this board and how many are in what we call post, meaning they've come to the board and they're in either a hearing process or follow-up that would be coming back to the board. And then the remaining cases with some aging. Part of the report is the board is required to make an extension pursuant to 676-165 if a case will exceed 120 days before the next meeting. Because we only meet every couple of months, that can happen. So that's the relative aging for that. And one of my favorite charts is the open close per biennium, which gives you how many cases have been opened, how many cases closed in a biennium. Some of the differential there is that cases can a complaint can be received toward the end of one biennium that carries over to the next before there's a board meeting or similar. So that's why you see some of that variation. And of course, the top line are for Oregon licensees. We are also tracking compact related cases, and you see the percentage of discipline there relative to the total counts of those populations. And that's the final percentage at the bottom. I'll pause there for just a moment to see if there's any questions on any of the material so far. None. If we turn into internal operations, the education and outreach for this particular period has been really renewal-based, lots of targeted emails. We're going to talk about that a little more in another section. And then in this term, Sherri Paru was a panelist at the Louisiana Extra Mile Conference that was previewed at the last board meeting. And that was just a few weeks ago. And she'll have some more material on that to share with the board in just a bit here. Administrative highlights. This is the dashboard that tracks the governor's expectations for all state agencies by section. This has the specific accountability, the relative due dates. It's a little hard to read on the screen there, but you can zoom in if you're looking at the PDF. As a reminder to the board, if there is something that's due in the near future, I will make it yellow just as a caution to make sure that we're tracking toward those deadlines. If I had concerns about us meeting the deadline or we missed a deadline, it would be red. I try to take a very conservative use of the dashboard colors. What we have coming up is related to strategic planning, the DEI plan, and the IT strategic plan. For 2026, it's a progress report. It's just a report out to the powers that be, if you will, at the state on how the board is progressing, what progress we've made. So it's a relatively short report out that we're required to do this year. The larger body of work is the next full plan is due June 2027. And that's why you have been and will continue to be working on the next version of the strategic plan. But by June 1, we have to submit an update on the work that you've been doing. Since the last meeting, everything else has been green, and there's some details here about some of the prior reporting. Under other highlights, which is just under the dashboard from administrative highlights, we had previously talked about coordinating with the Department of Administrative Services, or DAS, on a statewide licensing request for proposal to establish a master agreement with different vendors. As you know, we're getting to the end of our current contract for the current vendor. There's been some concerns there. So we've been participating with, as have other licensing agencies, in the development of that. DAS is actually a little behind schedule on what they initially thought would be the release date. They thought it was going to go out last fall. It is not yet out. I think it's probably realistically going to be summer before they're able to get that out. But I should have hopefully more concrete timelines to report back to you at your May meeting. And then in general admin, the requisite external financial audit As a semi-independent agency, the board retains outside accounting firms to come in and review and validate your processes related to financials. That was completed, and the report is made part of the consent agenda that was made available for review. There were no findings, which is a good thing in audit speak. And other notes, as is true, I think typically we receive these honors, but again, for 2025, we received the honor roll recognitions, Gold Star Awards related to reporting. It's somewhat mundane, but an important function of a state agency to make sure that we are being accountable and transparent to the state. And the other piece of that is that we are in the period of preparing the report that goes to the governor's office and to the legislature on the past biennium. So at the May meeting, you've heard pieces of this. The external financial audit is one of those pieces, the case closure percentages, but that full report will be available for your review at the May meeting. And with that, I'll stop the narrative. The other materials are the more detailed financials and the external audit. Are there any questions from members on any of these materials that we can address? Seeing none, Madam Chair,
There's no more discussion. We can have a motion to approve the consent agenda. If anyone, please do.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
First and seconded. Erin?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Hoku?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Erica is excused. Dwight?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, now open to public comments.
At this time, is there still no members of the public present in the room? Is there anyone online that wishes to make public comment? If so, if you raised hand feature, Sarah will monitor for that. Okay. Does not appear that anyone is wishing to make comment at this time.
Next item is the board member committee delegate reports.
On this, some highlights. Erin, did you want to?
I'm not sure I'm getting these emails anymore, so.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to maybe talk more about it?
Sure. There haven't been any for a month or two.
Okay, maybe that's why I'm not getting the emails. Like, wait, I haven't got an email.
And this is just the most recent, there haven't been any activities, but the most recent status is that Nevada, which you saw, we have one here, but they did go fully active in January. They are the 37th active member who is issuing. And then the other 3 states that are listed there, Connecticut, Maine, and Rhode Island, they are members of the compact. So they've enacted the governing statutes in their states. They're not yet active because they're standing up their programs and getting what they need. But you can see that a pretty significant portion of the United States is participating in the PT compact. Notably for you, for Oregon, Non-members include Idaho and California at this time. And on the Federation side, don't know if we have anybody that's currently on a committee or a task force that has yet met. Although Sherri, I'm not sure if you were appointed yet to your task force.
Yes, I was. I was appointed to the a new task force that is looking at the Code of Ethics, and we are meeting April 30th and May 1st.
Great. Regulatory training is coming up very quickly at the beginning of April, and I'm excited that our newest member is going to be able to participate in that event and scheduled to be there. And I will be attending as well. The meeting also has a virtual component that's available to board members. So if you are available for even part or one of the days, you are welcome to sign up. If you do, just let me know so we can, loop you in there. And then the other major item that we have related to the Federation would be the delegate selection, which is the next item, unless anybody has any other updates or questions. Okay, next slide, please. So on this annually, the member boards of the Federation are required to designate a delegate and an alternate delegate. One moment while the sirens. Okay. Each year, each member board designates a delegate and alternate delegate. They participate in the membership meetings, delegate assembly, and the leadership issues forum and the annual education meeting. The compact or the PTCC delegate is an ongoing position. Currently, Erin is the delegate, but that one is continuous until Erin, I think, decides that she would like to turn over that responsibility. Is that today?
No, I can stay on.
Great. Okay. So then the requirements for the two positions are listed. It's the delegate is required to attend both the Life or the Leadership Issues Forum and the annual education meeting. Those are the dates. There's often, there might be a travel day that starts the day before, the day after, depending on flights. And then the alternate delegate is just the education meeting in October. So, Madam Chair, now is for the board to decide and discuss who would be appointed into those roles.
Okay. Is there anyone who is Sandra?
I would like to do one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference of
I think that
delegate or alternate?
so the alternate is just October, correct? I think that's the one I would like. But I'm open to either.
Okay. Other,
I'm also interested.
okay. And
Who are you looking at? Oh,
I'm interested in the alternate delegate position. I cannot go to the July meeting, unfortunately.
so,
Can you just tell me a little bit more about like what that means? Like, as far as responsibilities outside of the meeting?
Their responsibilities outside of the meeting are fairly limited. The delegate and alternate delegate, in addition to attending the functions that are described here, if the board were to want to put forth a motion to propose some kind of change in the bylaws for the Federation or some other service, there would be activity there. I'm not aware that the board has discussed anything that would involve that. And then there are one, possibly two virtual sessions that are related to the candidate forums. So individuals that are running for any of the positions, the delegate and the alternate delegate are both expected to review the materials on candidates, attend the forums or at least watch the recordings, and then of course at the delegate assembly, cast the vote for Oregon. Sounds like you have 3 folks interested
Yeah.
in at least one or the other position. I'm not sure if that was another expression of interest. Okay.
Okay, yeah, we have, so Hoku, interested in the alternate. Erin, did you have a preference, alternate or,
I'd be fine with either.
and Sandra also?
Either.
Either. How do we do this?
I went last year, and so I could technically bow out if you
Okay.
guys
That's
both wanted to go.
All right. All right,
So I'll take my name out of the hat.
okay. Yes, and as the delegate last year, realized why it's important to have 2 because sometimes your travel plans don't go.
Yes.
And yes, if that had been Erin, she got the flight there. And as the alternate, I took the delay. So we have Sandra open to being the delegate for
Sure.
attending both meetings, and then Hoku as the alternate. So do we take a vote on that?
If there's not a more than one candidate or individual interested in the same position, then you can do it as a motion to appoint those or designate those 2 individuals as the delegate and the alternate delegate.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion for that? Yeah. Yeah,
I make a motion that we appoint Sandra as the delegate and Hoku as the alternate.
I second the motion.
okay.
I apologize. Who was the second?
Mariah.
Mariah, thank you. The motion has been first and seconded. Timothy is excused. Erin,
I
Mariah,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
I,
Susan,
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight,
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you guys for stepping up for that. It's be very fun. South Carolina in October. Okay. All right.
Pardon me, the next item is the standard item on the board's agenda to, at a high level or a placemat level, bring the strategic planning process and plan to make sure it's something that's on your agendas every meeting. There is a link at the bottom for anybody following along in the materials or on the recording for the full strategic plan. But in this item, we highlight work or activities. So the focus that we're currently in for 2026, the renewals, the significant body of rulemaking as a result of the House bill, and there'll be much more detail on that with the project implementation plan for your May meeting. And then we touched briefly on the licensing system stability and replacement. A large body of work for any public entity or any entity that receives federal funds is to make sure that the website and any materials posted on the website is compliant with ADA Section 508. You'll hear more about that in May. Education and outreach, and then of course, starting up with the strategic plan engagement and the update to the plan. So that is 2026 in a nutshell. And we continue to work with those objectives in mind. Any questions on that? You also have a item coming up to go into much more detail. Okay. Okay, for next item.
Yes, please.
Okay. The next standing item for the board's agenda is a roundtable and an opportunity to identify future agenda items and share maybe learnings or questions that have come up for board members that you want to ultimately bring to this board and have us put on the agenda for public review and participation. This is the list as it's been standing and updated since your last meeting on topics that you want either additional materials or speakers to be listed on a future agenda. If you go to the next slide, please. Since we've been publishing that information on the future topics, what I have for you today is a preview of some of the materials that we've identified to further some of that future discussion. Okay, so the on the first topic that's been on the list for a little while now is the PTA PT student debt trends. These materials are clickable links. I just want to note that the board has not reviewed these materials. We're identifying them. The board will be reviewing them and then discussing later. If the publicly posted materials as well, they're clickable links so that anyone can view these documents. The most of these, I tried to find ones that were publicly available without a fee. That is the case for all of them, although the third one down, I believe it is, it's an abstract, and there would be a fee for the full journal. Next slide. Also clickable links. Some of the highlights of the material that you'll be reading, these are all direct quotes. This is not analysis, but some highlights from this particular study talks about that educational debt. So on these, and the sublines here are all clickable references to other articles that the Dixon, et cetera, et al. Are that referenced as part of their current study. But this is the research to date that debt effectively is known to affect physical therapists, affect life satisfaction, limit the ability to save in the future, economics, and ultimately influences the choice of work setting. And so this is what was driving their research and the belief in their case that sort of the economics and financial considerations need to be brought into PT/PTA programs from the beginning. Next slide. Continuing, simply quoting from the journals. This one, they did a systematic review of medical student debt. And no surprise here, but there is a significant association between educational debt and pursuit of a higher paying specialty. In general, there is that correlation that if you have higher debt, that's going to drive you to seeking employment or specialization that can pay you more. The current study, the thesis here was that the choices could affect the long-term job satisfaction or the attainment of additional post-professional certifications of credentials. That if it's too expensive, then folks either may not work in the settings they prefer to, or they may not be able to afford to seek further certification. Next slide. So these are some of the quotes from the conclusions of the study. They highlight several trends to a standard labor search model that's in the full article. But one of the details that they got into in the yellow text here is that if you're understanding the labor market, again, probably not terribly surprising, but those that are the youngest, 25 to 29 in that age group, had a median of an additional $80,000 of inflation-adjusted educational debt compared with population that are in their 40 to 44, that effectively by that time of being surveyed did not have any remaining educational debt. So this isn't the cost of education. This is over time, the cost to the individual of the debt that they incur. So a little bit different there. And then you see that they also talk further about the cost of education is going up fundamentally. And so that is having a disproportionate impact on the younger portion of the workforce than on the older portion of the workforce. And then when you factor in retirement ages and things of that sort, the number of individuals in your workforce will percentage-wise, as that year over year, that population is going to have these factors of personal debt that could be driving their behavior. Next slide. A little bit more on that. As far as those costs, and that it really appears to be impacting people's goals, their personal, economic, and professional goals, because they're faced with that increasing debt in healthcare in general. But it also suggests in their study that what they found is that PTs, because of that debt, they're working more. They're working longer hours, they're working more than one job, and that is impacting their job satisfaction, life satisfaction. Next slide. Now we're shifting to the second study, which is the Shields study. For those of you who have been on the board for a while, there was a presentation at the annual meeting in Iowa that Mr. Shields gave a preview of what ultimately became this paper. So in this one, it is looking at not just physical therapy, but multiple health professions. And then because they had a data set of physical therapy, there's some additional conclusions that they were able to do for the profession that this board regulates. And they tied their work into a net present value for this idea of a lifetime economic power. And that idea is essentially similar to the other model that the more debt that you go into a profession for, the less economic power that you have. And that's true of, right, anybody going in any kind of education. Next slide. Here you start to see some of the results across health professions. And then in the highlight, what they're finding is that the careers with the lowest salary growth and high debt relative to that salary, for example, most notably physical therapy, had a lower career net present value of all the modeled professions. 29% of physical therapy students graduated with more debt than could be supported by entry-level salaries. PT students from minoritized groups graduated with 10 to 30% more debt than their non-minoritized peers. Next slide. Next study, the next study here, career regret related to, so now it's like, that's all the information. So how do people feel about it was sort of the basis of this study. Entry-level education, this looked at both PT and PTA, but so with fewer words, the yellow highlight here was sort of the data in that. But of the folks surveyed, 41% roughly of PTs and 22% of PTAs reported career regret related to their educational debt. Next slide. And so the authors in this study, in their quote, this is where, in particular, as I mentioned earlier, they are making the case based on the data that debt management education needs to be made part of the core curricula. I think they would argue not just for physical therapy, but probably all professions on that. And that to the extent that regulatory bodies or government entities can help with additional financial resources should also be explored. Next slide. So a lot of going on here. This is information that's published by CAPTI, which is the accrediting body for PT and PTA schools. So what you have here, this is just one table out of a long report that looks at education programs in general, definitely worth a dive into. But on this, what I'm highlighting is the table that is the information reported by the accredited institution relative to the cost of program. So you see over 3 school years, in the end, it's giving you information about the percentage of institutions that are public versus private. The geographic constitutions, the South and Atlantic areas have the highest percentage of schools. The top states where you see concentrations of schools. And then you get into the data that has to do with the cost, which is mean. And you can see here that if you look at total cost of professional program, which does not include room, board, or any other expenses, but essentially your tuition and fees only, under the most recent year, public in district, and this is PTA, 13,000, in district, 22,000 out of district, and private, $43,000 a year. Next slide. This is still with PTA, similar table, and what they ask the institutions to estimate or to provide based on debt that flows through their institution, right? So it wouldn't include necessarily if a student is taking out private loans or other funding sources that the institutions aren't aware of. So there, it may be higher than this, but this shows you the distribution that for public schools, most have a debt load that's being carried by the students in that 68%. And then you go through that it mostly tops out with just a couple that are in that $20,000 to $30,000 worth of debt. Private school, much higher. It is interesting that in private school, there is a PTA program where they estimate an individual has $70,000 to $80,000 worth of debt. I would be curious as to see what's driving that because that looks like an outlier. So that's the PTA side. Let's look at PT. Next slide. Here they go back with a little bit more data on these reports. And if we dive over to 24-25, the cost in go to the total cost of public or in-state, you're at 74,000, private 124,000, and that's the mean. Right. And if you look back at the other columns, you can see sort of the growth between 21-22 from 69 to 64,000 for public and from 118 to 124. And again, just tuition and fees, not the total cost of ownership, if you will. And then, sorry, did I do one more on? Yep. So similar information on that as far as the debt. So instead of the tuition, which was the prior slide, now we're looking at the debt, again, reported by the program. This one is factoring undergraduate and DPT program debt. So it's not just the DPT program, but because you need the undergrad to take the DPT, they're looking at the total. And you get your mean, medium, and you see the standard deviation there. Next slide. So that is a highlight of the current research into the topic. And of course, I know the board hasn't read the materials. You've just had that. But you had identified this on Roundtable for a future topic. So my underlying question is, do you, in addition to bringing you the research and publishing that, are you wanting to see this as a future agenda item, or absorb the material, read the material, and then, have that factor into your future discussion that way?
Have any capacity as far as like, I guess, education, outreach to new universities to provide that debt to income ratio to like our programs in Oregon? Because that's something that I would be interested in if the board has the ability to like, not like force it into a program, but just to like encourage the universities to share that. Because I think that's where we can make like the biggest impact.
I think as far as capacity to share the information, we could certainly send out messaging suggesting that they review it. We could even, that's part of bringing this on in your public meeting, right? Is that you now have a list of the materials that you've been referencing that you want to discuss with your partners. My understanding is, at least on the CAPD publications, that those are sent to each of the programs each year. So at least those two publications and the last 4 slides that you had, they get.
Sorry, is that information, does that show compared to the other professions? Because I think it's really important for the students to understand like their ratio versus a PA, for example.
Yeah, I think we absolutely have capacity to share the messaging, and invite that discussion. I think that that as part of your continued strategic planning, this does seem like a key area that would be worth broader community engagement. My understanding is also that the professional association, at least the APTA, possibly OPTIP, but APTA at the national level, it has reviewed at least some of these studies and is starting to produce and make available materials for prospective students. But I think there's opportunity to have those broader conversations relative to Oregon. Absolutely. And I think that there are implications from a regulatory standpoint, understanding the pressures on the workforce that are going to increase on those that are entering the profession and the choices they're making. It appears that there could be impacts or consequences from your viewpoint on the regulation of the profession, but also ultimately for access to care.
I guess for me, one of the statistics not related to finance, but was like half the PTs regretting getting into the profession. If I read, I mean, I'd be interested in understanding that, because I think that impacts, the sort of the wellness of our workforce. And if people are having to work more and longer hours and they're regretting their choices, I mean, that certainly has an impact on the care that's being provided. I don't, from a board standpoint, there were some suggestions up there about, what regulatory bodies could or couldn't do to impact access to, financial support and things like that in the state. But yeah, that understanding of the well-being of our workforce.
I think another, as you framing it under the strategic discussions, or it would be within your authority, ability to put together or invite the educational programs in Oregon to a joint discussion at a future meeting. brainstorm or discuss or hear from them what they're doing or what they might already do as far as financial counseling or parts of their curriculum. That could be one option.
And also, I mean, again, on that, like emotional intelligence has been something that's been part of the educational programs, but students, you know, whether it's framed under burnout or whatever, but that students understanding the challenges they're going to face financially. And I think those studies kind of show how they're linked. That huge amount of debt is part of that regret. But are there other things that we're not addressing? You know, and starting with the educational programs to prepare students for a long practice life.
I think it would also, in the past round of strategic plans that you've had, has focused on the educational pathway. As far as in the past, you worked with the educational programs to focus on diversifying the pool of candidates that enter the programs. And there was a lot of work that was done a couple of years ago in particular. I could see if you wanted to make it one of your strategic objectives, a similar partnership, but that was focused on sort of that longitudinal participation that after graduation and that would tie into job satisfaction. So that could be something that you would consider for your strategic plan as a objective.
Can I make a comment? That career regret number looks very scary. And I think that I would be curious to see what that looks like for the general population outside of healthcare also, I guess, because it does feel like, you know, my kind of gut reaction is that it feels a little bit like I don't have anything to compare it to, right? So that might be something that we could look into as well, because I think that there's probably a lot of post-secondary careers that kind of have some thoughts about their debt to income ratios and career regret. So just my 2 cents, not specifically. Yeah, just one thing to think of.
I think it's a new world we live in because we have the problem in funeral service.
Makes it sort of full life cycle. Okay, then with that, the materials we'll also send out there in the materials, but we'll make sure the board you have the clickable links for the journal articles so you can look at that or distribute those. And then that reading and this discussion here will help inform future work and think about what else you might want to bring as far as board meeting agendas, or if you want to form work groups on any of these topics for future agendas. Next item.
Yes, please.
Okay. Now we get to talk about renewals for a little while. One of the our favorite subjects in even numbered years as staff. So we sometimes I feel it's I find it really exciting. Other people in my family find it kind of like watching paint dry, but watching the daily numbers go up and up, and I have feelings sometimes about the rate of renewal. And then Sarah runs actual data. It makes me feel better, and we'll get to share that data with you. But as of Wednesday, March 11th at 5 p.m., there were just over 3,500 renewals that were approved, which is about half your population of Oregon licensees, right? That's 7,000. And then you see the breakout of PTs and PTAs. Of that, the this renewal period, we enacted the auto approval option to try to speed things up for folks that are renewing. And you can see that the majority of those folks, or of those renewals that have been approved, are able to go through that auto approval process. So it's having a really big impact, I think, on that end. At the time, we looked at the numbers on March 11th. There were additional almost 1,300 in what we frame as new status. So what that means is that the individual has logged into the system, but they haven't submitted an application. So they've either started it or they made sure they could log in, but haven't answered any of it, or, you know, they're almost all the way done, but haven't pressed go. That's about another 1,300. So, and we're higher than that now. And I'll show you some trend lines on that. What I want to do, though, is that we're not aiming for 7,000, because we know historically every renewal period, because of those traveler populations, folks that leave the profession, that we lose typically between 14 and 18, 19%. It varies each renewal period. So the target that we're aiming for is to have approximately 5,700 to 6,000 to hit in that if we do the historical thing. I don't want to jinx it, but it's possible with the increase in compact privileges over the last 2 years that we may be at the lower end of the dropout. So we might exceed that, but if we run just purely on historicals, that's the range that we're aiming for. Next slide. So here's the chart that Sarah runs that makes me feel better. There's 3 lines here for the current renewal period, 2024 and 2022. And then what you're seeing across are the days of the renewal period from January through March 31st. And it's okay that you can't see the dates or the colors, but what you can see is a very steady, predictable line of total renewals as we move through this 3-month period. So we're on track. Next slide. In case you want more data about this, this is looking where the other one was a cumulative growth over time. This one is how many renewals come in each day. And again, green is the most current one, but you can see that we have the same pattern. Now, part of the reason you have a little bit of shift on where the bumps and the valleys are is because what is a weekend changes, right? The great big dip that's like halfway in, that's February 29th, which doesn't always exist. So you get a drop off on that. Yeah. And then where it starts to drive down at the very end, that's where we're looking in April. We still have folks that renew late, so they're on it, but you can see relative to where we are. And you also get an order of magnitude for March, right? Because from the dip that's the imaginary February 29th this year, all of that is March, which just dwarfs January and even February.
And I do want to point out that that dip on March 11th is because I ran this data halfway through the day. So in order to include that day and get the cumulative totals that you saw on the last screen to be correct, this day looks like it was a bad day, but it was really just only a 12-hour day so far. So that if you ran it today, it would have jumped back up.
All things that operationally make me at least feel better, and hopefully you too. Let's take another view at the renewal process on the next slide. What we're going to do is focus a little bit more on, we talked a little bit about how we made the change on the auto approval, which was to improve the usability of renewing for folks so that we tried to remove any delay, even though we were often 1 day approval time. That's still 24 hours that somebody might need a license to start the credentialing process or what have you. The other change that we made recently was to change the email newsletter outreach technology that we had. We used to do it internally, which was a very manual process of essentially dumping information into worksheets, manually sending it out, needing to do multiple emails because of spam limits. If you got more than a couple hundred in any one email, then it would bounce for everybody. And then you'd have to figure out what was going on there. So in the outreach via the new tool, we have a lot more data on who's getting it, what they're doing with it, when it's not getting through effectively. So far, there have been 3 renewal-related emails. Those of you on the board who are licensed, you may not have seen all of these because you may have renewed early and missed them. But in the beginning, on January 9th, when we sent out information about it being opened, it was sent to the 6200, and we know that about half the individuals opened that email. In that, we try really hard to provide information that's useful to individuals, both in those emails and then during renewal periods. We also use auto replying so that even if they're writing us at 9 o'clock at night when they're actually renewing, they may not get a hold of us if they're having a problem, but the auto out of office email they get has FAQ and key answers so that they can get support. And often what we find happened is that the next day, when Gayla reaches out to them, often they've been able to solve their problems because of that, rather than have to wait for us to be open during business hours. That first item, and so we can also see what links are useful to them. And you can see at the very beginning, most folks were interested in the pain management module, which had recently changed, and then the cultural competency courses. We also maintain every time we become aware of something that's new or that we see somebody's taken that meets the criteria, and we maintain on the board's website a list of information of courses that would satisfy that to be able to point folks to. And then we also try to point out ones that are free or low cost as well. And then you see in the subsequent one, you see the delivery is going down because these are targeted, meaning we run the lists, and if somebody has renewed, they're pulled from this email. So we're also not saturating inboxes unnecessarily. Another thing that we've been able to do that we weren't really able to do effectively or as effectively previously. One of the things you can see is that the bounce rate went down very significantly. Part of that is because in the beginning on the first one, there were some settings that the central IT department needed to make on our behalf to allow for it to work effectively. And it was something that they weren't able to get to for a little bit to correct it. But once they were able to configure those properly, you can see that a lot of those bounce rates went down. The other piece that's helpful and that we can start using is that MailChimp allows us to have a web-based version of the same newsletter. So it's something that folks can click through if it's not showing right in their email reader, but it's also something that we can use as an archive that people can access after the fact. And so that on this slide, that's a clickable link into the most recent campaign. We have at least 2 more, one primary prior to the expiration that would go out with a little more criticality or sense of urgency. And then one that would go out to any individuals that as of April 1st hadn't yet renewed to remind them again that they are no longer licensed or authorized until they renew their license. Next slide.
Comment.
Yes, ma'am.
This link clicks column, I do want to point out that that's individual recipients who clicked on anything. Sometimes we saw people who were clicking on every single link. They're only counted in here once. So, and you know, sometimes they're clicking on those links 4 or 5 times, and we get all of that data too. So it's not every link is counted once, it's every person is counted once. So we are kind of, when you look at it that way, we're reaching a significant number of people who are opening it, are taking the call to action, if you will, and clicking on things and finding that information.
The next perspective in this new capability that that you have is looking at non-open and bounce analysis. It's a whole new terminology that I'm kind of loving here, but definitionally, a non-open is that the email got delivered successfully but never got opened. It's possible that it hit a filter into spam, but there was no open of the email. A soft bounce is that there's some kind of temporary issue in the interwebs that's preventing a delivery. Often it's somebody's individual email box is full and denying it, or their mail server is blocking, for whatever reason, at least temporarily, receipt of a message. The state of Oregon as a whole sometimes has issues, particularly with anybody with an MSN or a Hotmail account. And it's because some of the large providers, if they're getting a lot of email or denial of service that may come from a particular IP address that could end up being associated with the state of Oregon domain in one way or another, that they will temporarily block traffic from the entire domain. And a hard bounce is the address itself is invalid or inactive. We're able to see and differentiate between these three. So if you look at there's only a small subset of licenses. If you look at the lower left, of people who, even through all three emails, still haven't opened anything from the board. Now, one of the things to remember is that we know that maybe 14 to 18% of folks that are licensed have no intention of renewing, right? And so when you take that into effect, that could be who this population is, right? We still have to send them the emails to make sure that they're making a choice, but we don't know what they intend to do, and so they're going to keep getting their emails from us. If we look at bounce rate, the most recent bounce rate is at 0.38%. I made the numbers really big, but it's very small on that. And we're talking 17 out of the 43 or the 4,400 that went out for the February one. Of that, there were 3 hard bounces, which is an even smaller percentage. One of those instances was an individual that had inadvertently mistyped their own email address. And then the others are, they are clearly work addresses, and it's bouncing back as that account doesn't exist anymore. So they used an employer address for their account. They've left that position, but they haven't updated with the board yet. That's all useful information because it allows us to reach out from the bounce list and let folks know, hey, you've got this typo, or we've got an employer address and it's not viable. Help us make sure that we have the right contact information for you. And then Gayla ran some comparison to some of the manual process that she was tracking. This example is October. I wrote 26, it should say 25. And it's a similar bounce rate, but we didn't have the ability to track a lot of those soft bounces, and there was no ability to track non-open data at all. So the 0.3, there's such small numbers that are equivalent anyway. If you get really detailed, then that 0.3% in the past is more equivalent to the 0.07% now. So, same, better, much more functionality. Any kind of questions so far?
How does the auto renewal process work?
Sure. What we've done is we've looked at the different steps on the renewal that are required to be completed. And if an individual enters in all of the requisite continuing competency requirements and the mandatory and then sufficient hours in the other categories, if they've answered all of the questions, all the attestation, if they've completed the or OHA's workforce survey, and they've paid, then the system will grant a auto approval of that. If they choose to pay by check, if they haven't if they haven't completed their continuing competency, they can't even get to the submittal process. But and the same for the survey. But once they get there, if there is any disclosure or attestation that is not auto approved, that goes to staff for review. I think I said a pay by check would go into that state as well.
Or if they're in a status of lapsed when they started the renewal, because they do have to do the additional ORJAM and the background check. And so those go for staff review as well.
I think a couple of highlights pausing here is that for the most part, the feedback that we're getting is positive. It's great because normally as a government entity, the feedback that you receive is negative. But it is nice when there's folks that have positive comments that they do take the time to share that as well. So most folks appear to be having a positive experience. We've had some positive comments that have come in. Issues that folks are seem to be having is there were a couple of instances in January, possibly in February, where there were larger telecommunications issues. There was an internet provider out on the coast. Verizon went down for a while, for a couple of days, just nationwide. And unfortunately, what happened is that there were individuals that were attempting to renew, but because there were issues on their side for connectivity, they were getting timeouts in the renewal application. Their experience of it, though, was that, our system was slow. They couldn't tell if things were going. When we looked into it, it wasn't our system, but it was, their means of connecting to the system. But still for them, that was their experience. There's been just a few comments on the Oregon Health Authority's workforce survey about why individuals have to complete that and pay for that, and some questions about that. And then probably the two other issues that folks are running into is they have some difficulty with completing the continuing competency. You do have to select a category and then put in a course. And if you haven't selected the right category, when you can enter something in, if you go back and change the category, the system will wipe out the entry, which is annoying. Let's be real. Yes. So that, that's something that in a future system, if we can not have that, that'll be an improvement for the folks that are running into that. And then there's little issues where if you're doing fractional credits, if you don't do a 0.5, if you're hand entering it or something, folks that don't know that you can type in there and they don't see it in the drop down. So we get questions about that. And then the last piece, what's that?
Pain module.
Yes, maybe that's why I'm blocking it, the pain module. This is something that's challenging because we have no direct control over it, the content or how it's administered. And OHA has changed the vendor that is providing support and tracking that. But folks are having a bear of a time, frankly, getting those certificates to print. And I think it's resolved at this point, but there were a couple of weeks there where OHA and the pain module vendor were sending folks into a feedback loop where they were sending us back to us for support to get their certificates, which we have no ability to even do. And then we'd have to, and it's, again, frustrating for licensees to get that collective runaround, right? So we've tried to reach out to the pain module folks and help as much as we can. And then we've put together some common messaging that goes into the out of office auto renewal and some of the other things that we share with folks. So we're trying our best to mitigate those pieces of it. Gayla, any other like issues or pain points that getting reported? Logging in issues. Yeah, some folks forget their passwords or and that. I think the final maybe piece that's a little problematic is the mail chip and the ability to use that mail server. More of our messages are getting through, but the licensing system is on a different mail server that the state controls. It's configured differently. And there are some issues where some of the messages that are auto-generated out of the system aren't getting through. So we have had some folks where they aren't getting your license been approved. And that's something that we're hoping to continue to work with the state IT to see if we can tweak some settings to get that so that those get through. And we've tried to improve our messaging on how do you check your license if it's been approved. And then maybe the final thing is that, and we haven't quite figured this out, but we have had a few individuals, like maybe 5 so far, where instead of renewing their license, they purchase a license verification. We think that they're going into the different interface where you can like update things, and then they're seeing that and thinking that's the renewal application. So we've had a couple of folks that figure it out after they've submitted their $25 and that, and then we work with them to get an actual renewal in. And I don't know if for the board members that are licensees, if there's in your personal experiences or anything else that you've heard of where folks are facing challenges that we can try to address.
It was really easy.
It is easy. I mean, I think I finally learned about like the first thing I do when I go to enter my continuing competencies, get that button at the top because, yeah, but it's pretty straightforward and easy. And I mean, I think the pain module is not something, I don't know if you guys get complaint especially as professionals who work with people in pain, and to have to take that is, sometimes frustrating. And I hope that people understand that it's not us requiring it, but the state, because it is sometimes, I don't know, seems like we don't agree with that. We have other options, or if other PTs have that experience, like this is what we do, and why we have to take that is frustrating.
Yes.
Wanted to add that I purposely haven't renewed yet, so I'm getting those emails. Just so I can be in the data.
I wanted to be first to renew.
I usually am like the test, let's do yours first. But now that we've done this, I'm real time getting those emails. So they are going out. I'm in that category of people that open them.
I think you're the only one in the room, Sherri,
That hasn't
because we're not
renewed?
yet renewed, but yes.
Promise I won't wait till the last day.
One thing, as I'm thinking about the pain management and the feedback loop that Michelle was talking about how OHA was referring folks back to us and we had to refer them back to OHA, is that one complication is that the new vendor that they are using is OSU, who is providing the online platform for that course. And so, just like we have folks who don't understand the difference between the board and OPTA, I think that folks are also confusing OSU, OBPT, OHA, OPTA, right? Like it's a lot of word salad. And so I think that sometimes it's just someone sees Oregon and assumes they know where to go. And so, yeah, I think a lot of the messaging, we have been trying to be very firm in those MailChimp emails that there are no alternatives to this course. This is the course you must take. Click this link right here, please. And so I think it does seem to be better than it was in years past in terms of folks taking the right course. But yes, I definitely hear you, Susan, about how for PTs, it does feel a little bit like, wait, but everything we do is pain. So yeah, it's getting better, but it is still a bit of a pain point for us as staff sometimes, and for licensees, I'm sure.
I do want to check in. Okay to keep going, or
Do we need a break? Yeah, I think it's time to take a little break. I need to get to that, what I'm supposed to say. So we're gonna, um, the time is 9:52, and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy will adjourn or take a break, recess for 10 minutes. So not return at 10:03.
10:03.
Okay, the time is 10:03, and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is back in public session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the picking up on renewals, we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to shift a little bit to talk about the audit process that's associated with renewals. The first audit is of the continuing competency. This is also tied into the to Dwight's question about the auto approval. In the past, one of the things that we did was a full audit of CC before we approved things. But based on the statistical data that we shared January, I think, the very relatively small portion of the population had issues with continuing competency. So that's part of why you decided to move to that auto approval. But we still want to do the audit. So what we're doing is in the March through April time frame is going in and doing that check of continuing competence. Now, before 2020, and we had the automated renewal, and there were the paper-based renewals, folks would just attest that they completed sufficient hours. Some of you may recall this, but then you would there would be that random selection of audit. That was approximately 10% of the population. What we are suggesting, and unless you'd like to see a different percentage, is that we pool a 20% of the population to pool. And part of that is sort of a weighted random, because we want to help folks make sure that they're hitting those mandatory requirements and to be able to check that. And if there were individuals that had prior issues with completion, to help make sure that they have been able to navigate that successfully this renewal period. And then the balance of that fully random on that. And then the other piece that we typically audit is the LEDS, which is the law enforcement data system, or the background verifications. Folks do attestations on that, declarations. But then we typically, in the past, we've done that also before approval. We are proposing the full 100% of audit again this year, but in that April to August timeframe. Okay, to proceed with those targets.
So in that, like someone in April to August, if something comes up in that audit, or they will be.
In both audits, yes, the consistent with the delegated authority that you've established, anything that could be a potential case or violation is brought to you. Anything that might be addressed administratively would still come to you for ratification. Your March and April, so for the continuing competence audit, I would expect anything out of that would come before you in May at that meeting. April to August would probably be your September meeting, unless there were something that might come to May or July. But the conclusion of that could go up until August. It might be finished sooner, Depends on how we automate that, but that's our target window given other priorities as well. Okay. All right. Next slide. So before you today is a request for course approval. This is under the OAR related to courses or activities approved by the board by special request. This does require approval or that the request for approval, is made to the board in writing at least 60 days prior to the expiration or by January 31st. So this one didn't start out as it isn't impacting just one individual. How this came about is that folks have been entering courses in the system since it opened, which I think was available as of either August or September of last year. Folks could start logging their certificates. 2024. Okay, thank you. And but we started looking at things recently during the renewal period. So in an exchange with one individual looking at a specific certificate, that a request via email associated with a licensee in this situation. But looking in the system, we can see that there are multiple licensees for whom this is true, even if they're not aware yet that there's been an issue. And what happened is that there's a series of courses that were sponsored by OSU Cascades, called, the certificate is the Bend Beaver Connection Education Night for 1 hour of CEU, no other detail. And the course provider believed that the courses qualified under Section 2C, which is the one that said courses, activities sponsored by a Institute of Higher Education, which they obviously are. But the issue is that the course, it's not a college course. They were doing it under sort of the CEU, the non-credit pieces of it, but it hadn't run through their original process for assigning a credit. It was just a determination that the provider made. So we did reach out to OSU Cascades to get more detail about what was covered. Does it otherwise meet the criteria? And in order to bring this to you. So if you look at the overall situation and when it first triggered, it did trigger within the 60 days, even though ultimately the letter directly from the provider in support of that one licensee came in, I believe, on February 28th. Next slide, please. So this is a little hard to read here, sir. I don't know if you can. Yep. So here OSU Cascades is describing their event series and the type of content that was covered in those sessions. And in addition to the letter, they've attached an example of the speakers that were at each one of these sessions. Sarah, maybe if you jump to the next slide. And what this shows you, two things. One, each one of these is a specific event. So they had one night in April of 24, May of 24, October of 24. And for each of those specific dates, that was the content or the lecturers that were speaking for that specific Bend Beaver night. So they are clinically focused. And their format was part lecture and then part interaction and discussion. So it is something that generally would qualify from another provider. And the OSU letter, they've also, they've stopped the offering until they work through their internal systems to have the official credit assigned to it. The official credit assigned to it isn't required under the special request. So what's before the board Sarah, to the next slide, please. Um, the fundamental question is, do you want to approve these courses that were offered by OSU Cascades under this course approval special request? If you do, then what would happen is that that approval would apply to all of the offerings for all of those dates that you saw, unless you wanted to look at the specific offerings to see if there's one that you weren't comfortable with that meets the threshold. And then we could do that. If you approve, then all of the licensees that have submitted these as part of their qualifying continuing competency, those would count toward credit. If the request is denied, then we would go through, find those individuals and reach out to them. So before the expiration of the renewal period, they have an opportunity to take other qualifying continuing competency so that they're not negatively impacted either way you decide. With that, I'll stop and then we can jump back to any of the materials or however you'd like to proceed, Madam Chair.
Just a quick question. How do you usually decide whether the continuing competency courses qualify? Is there a rubric or something?
We follow there is the criteria that's laid out in this section, and most of it is to sort of summarize that if it's a course that's been approved or accredited by another board of physical therapy or healthcare, if it's offered by like an association, healthcare related association, if it's a course that's offered by higher education institution, that would also count if it were officially accredited, right? The board, unlike some of the other boards, we don't pre-approve continuing competency, but there's the list of criteria that if it matches this and it covers this content, then we do that. This one didn't quite fit in anything else, which is why it's coming to you.
I was just going to add that I think they assumed it would count because it's offered at OSU Cascades. Part of the confusion with this one too was the certificate just says Ben Beaver Education Night, and it's not specific to each one. Like the topics aren't on the certificate. So if someone handed in, I mean, they have the date on it, but if someone handed in 4 certificates, it just looks like the same thing 4 times, which you can't take the same thing 4 times. So they did let us know it wasn't the same thing each time. They put a lot of work into showing us what was presented each time. And in working with them on this, clearly is some clinical content that was being delivered, probably better than a lot of things that people take online, right? But they realized when I reached out to them that we probably should have done the certificate a little different way, or at least, for each class had, objectives and goals and things that people could have in case they were audited. So that they're really willing to do whatever they need to do moving forward. But it would affect quite a number of people that took the classes. And, this is an educational program that we do a lot of work with, and they're all really great there. So I don't doubt there was some good clinical content presented in these classes.
I was just looking through the list of all of them, and I was looking at the November 2025 RCRS CPG rotator cuff repair. What is the S? I was just Googling it and I can't figure out what it is. Like, I'm assuming rotator cuff repair. What?
I would think it's more a billing type of a thing.
A billing thing?
It's the
Review
of the clinical practice guidelines, but on the RCRS.
surgery maybe, or
Okay, rotator. Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and the people listed there, they said previously are physical therapists who are giving
yes.
these?
They're all physical
Yep.
therapists.
Okay.
Yeah.
And many of them are, of these names are at least adjunct at one or more facility.
And it is hard for people in other parts of the state to get, Susan, to get in-person continuing ed versus doing, an online seminar. So I think the intent is really good of what they're doing.
I think the content looks really solid. Like, I want to go to some of these.
I think Sarah might have looked through that. No, we just had one come in yesterday, the day before. There's quite a number of people. I would say at least 10 to 20 people,
Who have taken multiple of these.
at least
so-
one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do they have the ability to issue like new certificates now that we've gone through all of this so that it doesn't just keep flagging in our system over?
Well, they're going to change it moving forward. They don't
Yeah.
offer it anymore. So yeah, they're going to change the certificate, go through the right channels at the school to offer it.
That's
So
for go
that's their
forward.
plan
But
moving
for the
forward.
old certificates in the materials that's summarized here, that provides the detail that we can attach on the back end to each of those certificates. Right.
Because they each have the date. They're not just one blanket, with a date range. They each have the specific date on it. They also said that not too many people took, all of them.
And how did this, I mean, like Mariah used the term like flag in our system, but was it flagged in the system or someone?
It's not automatically flagged. There was somebody that had some questions on their certificates. And then part of what we do when folks reach out to us is that we go ahead and look at their continuing competency so far and let them know if we're seeing anything so that they have an opportunity to correct it. So with this individual, they had reached out and Gayla had gone through and done that review and then worked with them. And that's what triggered the January 31st request to have it approved to make sure it qualified.
And I will say that seeing some of these names of the actual event, I would guess that it's higher than 10 to 20 big titles versus just Bend Beaver Connection. And I didn't,
Oh,
if I just
Yeah.
saw it in the list, nothing flagged it.
So
as-
people entered the course name as acute management of soft tissue injuries,
Yeah.
but their certificate just says Bend Beaver Nights.
But if I didn't go through and click all the way through to open up that specific certificate, I wouldn't know necessarily.
Dwight?
Well, if you guys are physical therapists, you guys know the content on this. My recommendation, if you guys agree to allow them to get credit for it.
Yeah. What I say too.
Then to make it official, you'd need a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
I-
Go ahead, Dwight.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the course content. How should I name this?
You can say offered by Oregon State University Cascades.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we approve the course content offered by OSU Cascades Clinical Connections Nights.
That works for a motion.
There's a motion on the table.
I second the motion.
Motion is first and seconded. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin?
Aye.
Mariah?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Hoku?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight?
Aye.
Motion carries, Madam Chair.
Okay, next item, please.
Legislative session. March was a busy month. For context, Oregon has legislative sessions every year, or has at least from, I think, 2008, 2009, maybe 2010. It's been a while. But what they have is a long session or a regular session, which is in odd years, odd numbered years. But in even years, they have short session, which was originally conceived for fixes or budgetary items, but has increasingly also often included policy items. So short sessions, 35 days in duration. This particular session, there were 295 bills that were introduced, about less than half of that passed. In comparison, long session, which is coming up for us in 2027, 160 days and an average of 3,000 to 4,000 bills. I think last year it was about 3,600 total get introduced. Obviously, not all of those pass, but that's a factor of in short session, each member is limited to 2 bills. The speaker and the president have unlimited bills. Committees can have bills, but agencies do not. In long session, members get unlimited number of bills typically, and then so you get an exponential effect. Next slide. So how did it go? They did sine die or end the session on March 6th, so just recently. In that, in summary, there were several bills that related to public meetings or administrative rulemaking law, and then bills that had to do with the state's overall budget and the cost of services. So we're doing an analysis on that to see how that impacts your processes. For example, there was one, it's kind of a clarifying change that had to do with board deliberation around serial discussions. So they've added some additional language and clarification around that. So that will probably be in the form of additional training for you at an upcoming meeting or adjacent to one of the meetings to make sure that you are aware of all of the changes in law that impact what you do. The state budget cost of services, how that impacts us is that there are some adjustments to general services costs. So some of the services that we work with, particularly through the Department of Administrative Services, some of those fees will probably go up, frankly. So it'll affect us through those services that we make use of. And then on the policy side, sort of the key focus as far as the governor's agenda were bills related to behavioral health, privacy, both for healthcare providers and patients, and then a series of bills that had to do with law enforcement and the coordination between federal, state, and local law enforcement and entities. Transportation, particularly with ODOT, and funding, a pretty significant funding bill to add back some of the services that were some of the deep cuts that were impacting particularly outside the Willamette Valley. It's being restored. And then items related to education. So not all of that obviously impacts this board, but as part of our analysis, we'll give you at least a summary on that. In the interim, and interim work is in between legislative sessions. In 2026, there was a bill that was introduced, House Bill 4095, and these are clickable links as well. This was a bill that addressed all semi-independent agencies, of which you are one. The bill, as written, proposed a number of changes to the underlying governance, particularly around financial management. It would require essentially you to move into the state treasury for financial management and also require participation in the general biannual budget process and reporting process. In working with the sponsor, Rep. Gomberg, what was identified is that there's a significant cost impact to making those changes. some other complexities that the short session didn't allow time for that kind of discussion. So what is scheduled is that there will be an interim work group formed with the representative to explore this and discuss the options. Now, I think what's really important to highlight is that what the representative wants to make sure is that there's appropriate oversight and transparency for all of the semi-independent agencies. And this was one proposal of getting there that would have changed that. So I think everybody is absolutely on the same page that that's important. So the question is, what's the best way to get there without having inadvertent or unintended consequences? So for example, if our overhead costs go up because of the migration, then licensing fees go up, which impacts constituents. So that work, very essential, and that will need to be completed between now and before bills drop, so fall. The second body of work comes out of a House bill that originally passed in 2025, Senate Bill 476. There was a revision in this past session, the 1595. All it did was extended the timeline for compliance. It's a bill that requires a number of things for all occupational licensing boards, not just healthcare, and relating to culturally responsive training in part, as well as needing to post and have information available for folks that are educated outside of out of the United States on how to different pathways for licensure. You have information already on your website, did prior to 2025, between what you have on your site at the state level, but then also linking through to Federation has information that's available for applicants. So the work for you is not making sure you're meeting the bare minimum intent of the bill. The requirement is meant, but ways to make it better, more usable in exploration. And then the training is an interesting one because there was some confusion in the original bill about who's responsible for developing the training that everybody's required to take. And is that going to happen centrally, or is it going to happen agency by agency? And so that work group that we would be participating in will help answer those questions so that everybody, right, the board staff have taken multiple trainings that are related to being culturally responsive. But what we don't know, since there isn't that set curriculum or the standard to be held to, we don't know if it's compliant with what their intent is. So that'll get developed out. Any questions there?
I don't know if you'd have more, like when we had the presentation from the psilocybin board, was there legislation put forward in this session related to that?
Madam Chair, that is an excellent question, and I'll have to get back to you on that one. That was in an omnibus bill, and I didn't specifically look at how that one ended up at the end of the day.
Okay.
Last time I looked at it, it was moving through the system, but I don't know on Sine Die if it had passed all the way through yet or not. But I'll flag that and follow up.
Thank you.
Anything else on session? One other piece to note is the process for agencies to have bills. The deadline is April 10th. There's nothing that this board has discussed about having a legislative concept for 2027. I think in part because we're still implementing 2025. But I just wanted to check that assumption that there's no legislation that anybody was considering yet. Okay. Next slide. Going to move to the next discussion item. This is an exciting one. This is related to a pilot that came out of your discussion in the last couple of meetings, actually. But at the last meeting, you reviewed the healthy practice resource, and that's where you determined, I think at the November meeting, actually, that qualified for non-clinical continuing competence in Oregon. And you discussed that the tool itself could be helpful in other ways, in part through the investigative process was one of the items that was identified. Part of the theory there is that with the board's strategic objective of prevention of any kind of violations, that individual practitioners' self-awareness can help prevent potential for any kind of violation, inadvertent or advertent, before they happen. And so we took your discussion and looked at setting up a pilot program to test that implementation and gather data to then determine scope of any future rollout. Next slide, please. So here's the initial scope. The pilot would be initially limited to complaints that are related to documentation or billing issues, supervision, ethical or non-sexual boundary violations, general scope of practice, or patient injury. And scope of practice would include things like practicing outside of scope or practicing with a lapsed license, things at that level. So avoidant of things that are more direct patient harm. The participants, this would be optional, participants would be offered that only when at the end of the process, if you determine that you'll be issuing a confidential advisory letter, or where it's specifically made part of a settlement agreement. The pilot would not require participants to submit or share any other results or any of the plans as part of that with the board. And that's driven on the fact that the intent of the board is for, of the tool is for self-reflection and improvement. And so not wanting to make that something that's mandatory unless you've made some part of it a proactive term of a settlement agreement that they are choosing to enter into. But if they opt in to complete the tool, they will also then be provided a self-reflection template that the board would provide to help them consider if any of those factors contributed to the violations, and if there are any actions that they could take to mitigate any future kind of impact. They would also be asked to, and again, just to underscore, that would be confidential. They could choose to share that with us or not. What they would be asked to do, but also not required, is to complete a post-survey as part of the closeout of the investigation. And part of that is to gather, was this helpful to you? What recommendations do you have? So envisioning those kinds of questions. And all of those materials remain confidential as part of the investigative files. However, what we would want to do is take anonymized aggregate data to compile and report publicly. So that would look like how many people participated, what kind of feedback did they provide, that kind of information. Next slide. What we'd like to do is we would also recommend that kind of with this concept and rolling out that there be an advisory group to be able to get some, community external input on the process and the framing and sort of that participation in this test of that investigative process. What our thinking is, in looking at individuals that have completed the healthy practice resource as part of their continuing competence requirements, in a quick scan, we can see that there's more than 20 people that have utilized that as part of their continuing competence, that have completed one or more module. We think since those individuals now have familiarity with the tool, that they could be provided to participate in an advisory group to work with the pilot, flesh out some of the messaging and kind of be part of the ongoing process. As well as other interested parties who are willing to complete one or more of the modules. And that could broaden it out to other licensees, members of the educational community, researchers, whatever would be appropriate to have that external input. And then what we recommend is that we have a review point 1 year from implementation, which would be, if you move this forward. And at that point, you should have enough participation to at least make a preliminary decision of, is it accomplishing what you're looking for? Do you want to expand it or modifying it? But that we would aim for about a 1 year pilot period. So with that, I want to check in, make sure that that we took your direction in the right direction, and if we should proceed.
A nervous tick. I recommend that we start the pilot program.
And I don't think you need a formal motion on this one, since it's sort of fleshing out prior direction, but we just want to make sure that y'all are, that we're doing what you want. Sounds like yes so far.
And so staff would be reaching out to these 20 people for, like, do you have a minimum number that you want on an advisory group, or as many as want to?
Yeah, I think that 10 is a fairly manageable group. So I think we would reach out and kind of gauge the interest, but I think we'd also balance that where if we have individuals that really want to be engaged in part of it, that we would work out a way for them to participate or give input. I'm not expecting that it would be much of a load, but that we would run this by them and some of the modeling. I would probably also like to reach out to somebody like a psychometrician who designs question sets for that post-survey to help make sure that what we're capturing is something that's statistically relevant. And we would frame it up, if you could go back one slide, kind of to that. This is a concept, but if they had, other sort of implementation recommendations for the best way to do that. And then I think the big thing is on messaging, right? Part of this is there can be a stigma in healthcare about wellness, right, and self-reflection. And so I think messaging around this, for whether it's somebody who ends up participating through this particular pilot, I think that they would help advise on that as well.
I think this is great.
Okay, then we will make it so.
Next item, yes, please.
Okay. The next item I'm especially excited about, and not just because I get to stop talking very soon, but one of the strategic objectives for this board is prevention. We just referenced some of that in the prior item, and a focus on education and outreach. So you have flagged in prior discussions that there may be an opportunity for the board to directly provide continuing competency offerings, and also highlighted ways to increase outreach, particularly in other parts of the state, and that could be an opportunity. So this concept, in furthering kind of your discussions and directions, is that if the board were to begin creating continuing competence options, that it would be focused on topics that are relevant to Oregon law requirements, trends that we might see in violations or things that would be helpful to help mitigate that, and licensing processes. That the concept would be free or very low cost if it's a board offering. And to begin with, at least, individual discrete courses. You're not looking to set up a whole conference or a convention, but start small. And that it would qualify for credit. Next slide. One of the other factors is that that it would be board staff. So this would be within sort of your current budget constraints and staffing constraints, but open for possible other speakers. And so that could come from another state agency, perhaps, depending on the topic, or somebody from outside the state. Part of the recognition here is that you have a number of staff that currently regularly present nationally on different content topics, and board staff present regularly to the Oregon PT/PTA programs already. So you already have a source of content that you could repurpose to expand its value. If presentations are being delivered to the educational community, why not the licensed population if it's relevant? If presentations are being given nationally, why not bring those to Oregon and offer those up as well if they're of value? And the idea is that there's some content that could be made into a virtual piece. Some of it could even conceivably be clips of some of what comes to you in public meetings that could be repackaged and used for course purposes. But what we also want to do is provide the opportunity for in-person interaction and courses, I think, to one of the prior items. And one of the ways that we can accomplish that is that there is work that takes us into other parts of the state operationally, related to interviewing, compliance pieces, and then education outreach, so that what we can do is bundle the offerings for when we're already in another part of the state, which happens pretty regularly. And then that could be monitored. And if we see that there's a part of the state we're not getting to for some other reason, then the board can make a decision to specifically target that area. But to begin with, that's how we would accomplish it. And I think with that concept, what we want to do, next slide, is give you a little taste of, I mentioned that Sherri was a panelist at Louisiana's conference for their licensed population. So to give you a taste of what this could look like, I'm going to turn the mic over to Sherri, who's going to give you an excerpt from her presentation in Louisiana.
Am I on? So a few weeks ago, I presented at a conference in Louisiana that they call the Extra Mile Conference. This was the second year in a row that I was invited to present. Last year, the content was really in regards to just sexual misconduct and boundary violations and how to prevent yourself from getting mixed up in that. But this year, the whole focus of the conference was really about practitioner well-being. And they had a couple of presenters that I think some of you would have seen at the annual meeting. They had a presenter that spoke about, she was a physician who had some mental health issues and was afraid to report it on her application for for license. And she presented, and then there was a couple of other people. Nancy Kirsch from New Jersey presented, I think, several lectures about well-being. And so they asked us to kind of talk about well-being and how it fits in with people who have boundary violations. So what we did was, it was a 2-hour presentation. It was myself mainly and Stephen Curley, who is on the FSPBT board and also is the director of the Kentucky PT board. And then Christina Lounsbury, who was the chair of the FSBBT's Informed Consent Task Force, and Christina served as our moderator. And what we did was we gave a little bit of very brief talk, and then we showed some videos. We broke up into breakout groups. There was about 325 people, I think, in attendance. So to break up 300 people into breakouts was fun. But what we did was we gave sort of each section of the room different thing to look at. So like the left section all looked at the perspective of the therapist. The middle looked at the perspective of the patient. And then the other side of the room looked at the perspective of, anyone else, the board, other patients, other people who would have been affected. And what we did was I actually reached out to several licensees who had been the subject of disciplinary action from the board. And I asked and we had a professional videographer, or actually we didn't video, it was audio, but we asked them if they would like to participate in this project. And I had 5 people who agreed to do it. And I had met all these people before when I interviewed them, and it was so eye-opening. Each interview was about an hour, and I learned so much from these people just from reflecting back of where they are now. And then we created, we were going to do video, but instead of doing video, we just did audio clips so that way we didn't have to blur their face and change their voice. So we thought this was the best way to do it, and I think it worked out really well. And then but the really cool thing is I have the whole hour of content from these people, and then we just created what we wanted for this presentation, but I still have all that other content that we can use to kind of create other 5-minute clips if we want to in the future. And so we showed it at this conference, and what we did was I'm going to show you guys, we had a minute of, hey, this is me and this is what I did. Then we broke out into breakout sessions, and then we came back and said, okay, let's hear from the real people and what they say. I was so surprised and excited about 300 and something licensees who are in a room for getting their continuing competency for free, and how engaged they were. I really was expecting people to kind of just be like, oh, I'm here because I'm getting my free CE, and let me just go through the motions of sitting here and do something else while I'm sitting here. But people were really, especially when we did the breakouts, they were really, really engaged. And then we had report back from the tables. And, I'm used to giving lectures to regulators and people who are really into this stuff. Not just, your average licensee who I just didn't expect the amount of engagement that we had through the whole weekend. It was really neat to see. And then at the end, we kind of went through a little bit of takeaways and tips. What did we learn from all the breakouts and from the videos? And then what I don't have in the presentation for you all, because you've seen it, is we gave a lot of resources, like what if that we went through the healthy practice tool, if people were interested in that. We gave them like what resources are available through the Federation, and then sort of like what can you do to help yourself and protect yourself sort of moving forward. So Sarah, I think you can move to that. So, sorry, I used your name, Susan. Just made a name. So this is the first clip that I showed before the breakout, and then I'll have you guys listen to it, and then I'll show the clip we did after the breakout, and then I can mention a little bit of what we talked about in the break. I think the real gist of what we just missed at the end was the helpfulness of the boundaries class, and how every person I interviewed that had to go to a boundaries class said that, and how being around other medical providers who had boundary violations, different levels of them, was really extremely helpful for them to talk to other people that had been through it versus meet with me or, just go to a therapist or something. Every single one of them said, oh, that class was so great. I wish we would all take it ahead of time. I wish I would have taken this before anything. The other thing that I think everybody I met with also said was, and you got that in the video, was the stress that was going on for them when the violation happened and counseling and things after the fact that reflecting back would have been helpful to do before. So sort of the takeaways from, we showed 3 different scenarios in the presentation, and the takeaways we had from all of them was the slippery slope of, how it starts, and then things just slowly get worse until all of a sudden there's a real big boundary violation at the end that was sort of creeping up that people didn't realize. The real challenges, and this was interesting presenting this in Louisiana, because pretty much every town in Louisiana, other than I think New Orleans, is a very small town, kind of like here. So the challenges of working in a small town, where you're already familiar with everybody, you already, everybody knows each other. Personal stresses and trauma for the therapist and the patients. The power imbalance was a big one for me because everyone I talked to, and including the audience, it's hard to understand power imbalance. Like when you say, was there a power imbalance? People are like, no, there wasn't. And I always say, there always is. So that was an interesting concept there. And then just the isolation of going through the investigation, the boundary courses being beneficial for insight and ability to reflect back on their behavior and how it affected others. And everybody talked about how board action affects you for sort of the rest of your career. I also thought it was real eye-opening to hear from people who thought, what was the effect on other people? Like other patients, if I can't go to work, other patients can't see me. Or just if I have to come to meet with the board, I have to cancel my patients that day, that one day, the patients that get affected that day. So sort of the trickle effect of having to, or if, I'm having some real struggles mentally and I can't be my optimal self at work. I also interviewed people who had issues with substance abuse or alcohol as well, not just sexual boundaries. So it was a really great presentation. Like I said, people were really engaged, gave us some really good information. And then I have 2 more video clips that we're going to put together. And yes, you asked about an AI voice. It was an AI voice that I used. So we didn't have real video, real content, the person's real voice, but still were able to get most of the content of what people gave me authentically in there.
But just to underscore, as Sherri mentioned earlier, that the character of Susan is a fictional compilation referencing a number of cases and is not in any way a single case or referencing any confidential investigative information.
Yeah, right. I took a bunch of different people's information and created
it's a fictional character that's based on a number of past things and not just in Oregon. So next slide.
This was just a slide that I showed the audience of the continuum of boundary violations, starting out as you have a provider relationship, boundary drift, boundary crossing, violations, and then sort of how, if we can work with people on that very left side before it even gets to the green dot, or at the green dot, what can you do to stop it? That's a lot what we talked about last year. If things start drifting, how do you stop it? And what can you do? And how can you keep yourself from getting to the bright blue dot? That's a really difficult thing, for people to tell a patient, I'm not comfortable with what you're doing. We talked a lot when Gayla and I go out and talk to students. We talk a bunch about who's ever been uncomfortable with a patient, makes you feel uncomfortable. Every single person raises their hand. What makes, and what do you do when you're uncomfortable as a provider? How can you move on or do something differently so that you don't go further on down that line? Then next slide, Sarah. So then, at the end of the presentation, we talked about, to really reflect back what's going on for me. Do I need more support? Do I have a good supervisor, boss? Is it somebody that I feel like I can go to and talk to? Is my work environment safe and supportive? Do I have the ability to transfer the care to another therapist or recommend another clinic? Some people say, no, I'm the only therapist in that town. I can't transfer the care to someone else, or they know everyone else in the town other than me, so I have nobody, that I can transfer to. And then other people are like, yeah, that actually would have been really easy to do. I could have very easily said, hey, you should go see my colleague or go see this other clinic down the street. And then we talked a bunch about how can I keep my interactions professional without turning myself into a robot, and be very clear about boundaries, policies. I think when we go out and talk to the students, we talk a lot about having policies for yourself and also for where you're working, of texting, social media, socializing, being very consistent with everything. Sorry, we don't share social media with our patients. Sorry, I don't text my patient. Just be very clear about that from the get-go. And then if you are, then maybe you don't have to constantly be checking in about those things if you were upfront about them, maybe on day one. Next slide, Sarah. Then we talked a little bit about once you are, do have a board complaint, the stress of going through the investigation, the isolation, all of those things that come with it. And if there's a disciplinary action, sort of how it follows you moving forward, even if your disciplinary action was for not doing your continuing competency or practicing a few days without a license. It's something that doesn't come off your record and you have to report it, and it sort of follows you everywhere after that. And nope, that's it. I think we're good. I think that's the last one. So that was just a little snippet of what we talked about in that 2-hour presentation with down there in Louisiana. I got some feedback after the fact that it was very well received. Like I said, I felt people were really engaged. We had a lot of time, so 2 hours was nice because we had time for the breakouts and things. So a condensed version, I think, would be good. But we do very similar things to the students, and I think Michelle had a good point. It's like we already give these kind of lectures to students. Be nice to be able to share this information with licensees as well.
And so the discussion, that was just an opportunity to highlight the kind of content that Sherri and the other panelists had put together that could potentially be a version of used within Oregon. And it's something, even though the interviews in the core material was sponsored and acquired by Louisiana, they have given us, in essence, sort of a Creative Commons rights to use the material, and reference that forward. So discussion, opening it up, not just and just the larger concept. This is one example of the kind of contents available. So, but in general, are you wanting to continue to have us move forward with repurposing and creating this kind of content within the state of Oregon for our licensees?
Yes. Enthusiastic, yes.
Yeah, I think this type of thing is so just engaging. Like, I think it makes it stick with people. So I think that's so valuable.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm getting some pretty clear yeses.
Yes.
So we will proceed.
Okay, sounds good. Next item.
Next item, and this is two more agenda items. This one is relatively quick. We wanted to provide an update on the ETS, which is the organization that publishes and administers the TOEFL, which is one of the English language proficiency exams. We had brought to you, I believe, at the September meeting, information on a proposed change. ETS was modifying their score scale. A lot of detail. They're aligning with some of the international standards. But the end result is that it changes the score scale, not sort of the underlying function of the exam. At the time, ETS was communicating out to everyone that there was going to be a 2-year transition period where both their old score scale and the new score scale would be printed on the certificates. They changed that implementation with minimal, I think like a week's notice, that they actually beginning, I think it was January 24th, 26th, that the certificates that were produced from that point forward would only have the new score. And that's for folks that had taken the test. They do reserve the score reports for a 2-year period. So anyone that had taken the exam prior to that January date would still have the old score that was initially in place there. But what they did do instead was provide a crosswalk, an official table on their website that crosswalked or mapped the new score to the old score. Okay. So in looking at your administrative rule, it looks that the way it's written, it would still be viable using that ETS crosswalk, as long as they continue to make that publicly available and official. So there doesn't appear to be an urgent change needed to that rule in the interim. But out of the House bill, there are a number of changes to licensing in general. And so you're going to have to change those, look in that in more detail anyway, in the very near future. But it does not appear that there's an urgent need for temporary emergency rulemaking or anything else at this time. And I'll just glance over at Joanna on that. But you certainly could do something on that. But otherwise, it would be a policy at the policy level based on the rule that we would use the crosswalk for that equivalency, since they are mapping out the old score to the new score. So in your rule where it says like a 24, for example, we would look at where that 24 falls on their score crosswalk and then hold the individual accountable to that based on the current rule. Okay.
Okay. Next item.
The next item is because the progress report is due the 1st of June, you do have one more meeting coming up before that time, but we want to frame some things up for you so you have some time to think about that. Because as I mentioned earlier, the next full plan or rework is due in June of 2027. And so the new plan can have a longer time frame, but at least needs to cover that June 2027 through June 2029 time period. The way the state in general, the way the governor has liked the reports, they've over the last 10, 20 years, they've gone where it's all been in one plan, and then we were producing separate plans. And now the latest guidance is that where in the past we had a separate plan for each of these things, that they're looking to have the content of that inclusive in the strategic plan. So even though you're reporting out separately on those 3 plans, now what you'll develop will have the content from that moving forward. That, frankly, is consistent to the way you've always historically done it. We actually pulled out that information to report it for those, but it'll be included in it as we move forward. Next item. Very quickly, just because you already know this, but to frame out on the public record that historically this board frames up that the purpose of strategic planning isn't to create a plan. It's to make sure we're doing the right things at the right time in the right way. So it is an ongoing process of making sure that we prioritize, communicate, and implement, and then actively that you look at how things are going and make the appropriate adjustments. Next slide. This just lays out the general philosophy of the planning process, which is this idea of stepping back, taking a look, preparing, and then executing on the vision, confirming purpose, assessing how we're doing the environmental scans, and then that's what comes to the prepare phase, taking all of that input and making an actual roadmap. And then devil's in the details in the final step, that ongoing execution and monitoring and adjustment. Next up. So this is also to give you your sense this is from the prior plan or our current plan. And I note that in part because if you look at some of the numbers, they're out of date because they were at the time that the plan was published. But this just frames up that what your mission is, what the vision is, and then a description of the core functions, the sort of scope and size, and enabling statutes, rules, and licensed professionals that are licensed. Next slide. Also, the prior plan, you had framed things out as far as identified strategies and then action items within those pillars of continuity of operations, culturally responsive regulation, trauma-informed regulation, and focus on prevention. So at this point, those have been the categorical pillars that you've tracked different activities. And these are examples of what you identified in the past. Now, this is from the prior plan. So we've actually completed or made significant progress on almost everything that's up there. Some of that obviously is an ongoing thing. Modernizing IT systems and operations changes every month, and then training. But that's where you're coming from. And then based on your discussions and input from the community, you may use the same pillars or identify new ones and distribute the work. But that becomes, and that has been your sort of, as some folks call it, the North Star or the guiding principle that all of our operations and budgets tie back to. Next slide. Also in the last year, you've done part of the strategic scanning. The state has moved to asking agencies to do both the PESTEL view and the SWOT view. So the PESTEL on this slide is just this is a descriptive of what the different letters stand for. As far as the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental pillars of doing an environmental scan. So prior work on the next slide that you've identified, back one. Yep. Here, your prior discussions have identified under the political area, federal state legislation that impacts healthcare. And then also that there are varying trends politically with regard to regulation, deregulation, and how that impacts the board. Economics, there is significant impact over the last several years on the profession itself that's being licensed with regard to reimbursement rates, the overall cost of healthcare, cost of education, impacting licensees. Of course, all of that also impacts access to care. Social, still definitely feeling the impacts of the pandemic, I think, access to care in rural areas. And then this discussion about how we connect as a society has been shifting over the last decade, in particular with the advent of technologies and different, I think, generations in the workforce have changed the way some work cultures in different healthcare settings work. And then this idea of healthy practice. Technological, AI, system data protection and security is huge. From a provider standpoint, the advent of telehealth, and then that at sort of every level that there is this uneven investment or even access to new and updated technologies. Legal, scope of practice updates and changes. Part of that is the scope of practice from the legal standpoint and how that paces changes in practice, new technologies, new practices, new learnings, and whether the regulatory landscape is in line with that. And then finally, environmental. I get to attend a lot of continuity of operations, statewide events, and know way more about the Cascadia earthquake event that's being predicted than I think is healthy on a day-to-day. But as many of you know, the impact of balancing the environmental footprint with equal access to care. AI is a big consideration with the consumption of water and other energy resources, particularly in a drought state. Weather, fires, heat, snow, and then overall those impacts on community wellness and access to care. So this is what you've previously discussed and identified and is sort of the starting point moving into your next planning for the PESTL. But one thing to be thinking about coming into the May and future meetings is, does what here needs to be updated or expanded? Next slide. Similar on this is the SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is specific to the organization, not the profession. So what are we good at? What are we not good at? But let's go to the next slide. And in your prior discussions over the last year, here's what you've identified. Strengths of the organization is the connection to the national community of practice for regulation. Our focus on data collection and demographics and really being able to make more and more use of that. Generally, staff response time and experience is an asset. And we have very engaged board members, both public and professional, which not all agencies have the benefit of. We generally have positive relationships with external partners, and we have a efficient governance model currently as far as being able to keep costs down and be responsive. Weaknesses, there's 4 of us and we're not all full-time. So there are limited resources, limited dollars, limited time to do everything that we want. In spite of the fact that we generally are driven and have a desire to do it all, but with limited capacity, which can have some detrimental impacts. And we have an aging infrastructure, and I don't just mean the people here. So opportunities that you've previously identified, really looking at ways to appropriately and effectively utilize technology to streamline some things. I think the auto approval was one of the things that came out of that. And exploring partnership and other ways to do more through partnership if we can't do it strictly with the resources that we have available. Threats, there is a high risk of burnout and resource fatigue, both people and things. Cybersecurity and fraud, the threats there are increasing daily. And then year over year, the administrative overhead costs, cost of investigation, legal fees, everything is going up. And it just continues to make things more constrained on the resources that we have that are somewhat limited. So again, similar thing. Here's what you've previously discussed and identified. We need to think through and realistically see where we are on that. So as a next step, in addition to your thinking and coming back to do that, to help facilitate that, on the next slide, what we would recommend is, since you've been doing some thinking on this, is open it up to your community and outside partners. And one way to do that, in the past, you have held community days where it's been folks have come in and you've done strategic planning with folks who came based on that invitation that had been done in person. And then it was also done virtually, the community day. what we're wondering is this year, at least to start, not that you wouldn't hold those community discussions, but starting with a survey. This is an approach that other agencies have used, Department of Revenue, and appropriate to where we're being hosted right now. These questions are also similar, if not essentially identical to question sets that the medical board has used based on revenue in some of the larger agencies. The idea is that this would go out to your broad community licensees, other parties, tribes, employers, associations, but a very broad net of folks that interact in one way or another with the board, and ask some fairly open-ended questions for those that want to participate on the survey to get this input of what they see as the board's strengths and weaknesses, challenges and opportunities that they may be aware of that haven't come up yet, and how we can better serve the licensees and the public, and resource allocation. And if there's anything else, just a very open-ended question just to get feedback. The idea is this would go out. We would see what kind of responses come in. We would compile some themes and bring that out. And bring that all out to you to help build the next version of the SWOT and the pestle, but also really get a sense of where the community is and what the needs may be, and what we don't know or haven't asked for you to then decide how you'd want to proceed to a next step. So before you today is, if with that context, our recommendation is to proceed with a survey and these questions, unless you'd like to make any of those recommendations, and then attempt to distribute it such that you have the results of that for your May meeting.
So thoughts on moving forward with the survey? I mean, as we consider like who we would be sending that out to, I mean, do people have thoughts, like something that comes to mind specifically of, other than like who you would want to be included in that survey? Michelle hasn't already, like, we talked about licensees, educational, anything that anybody you don't want to have left out of who gets the survey, whose opinion, thoughts you want. I mean, would it go to, like, I think about other board, like, do we have access to like the medical board? I don't know, like.
Yeah, we would distribute it to everybody in who is a licensee or who has held a license. I would recommend sending it to compact privilege holders, probably at least ones that have active compact privileges. I would suggest folks that have had one recently, even if it's expired. I would recommend sending to other state agencies that we interact with. I would recommend sending it to legislators because they may hear things from their constituency that doesn't make it to us. The educational programs. And then I would probably also send it out to our tribal liaisons. And then to the extent that we have access to information on general employers and then the other entities that we work with, like Medicare, Medicaid, some of those other programs. Some of them are going to have more limited windows than others on answering some of these questions, but I think we can frame it up to, I think they're open-ended enough that, and we can make it clear that folks can answer one or all of the questions however they feel is appropriate.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, then unless there are any other discussion or anything else you'd like, Madam Chair, we would proceed with that.
Sounds
and
good.
Okay, then we are at the end of the public agenda items for now.
Okay. So would now be good
Yeah.
time for a,
I'd suggest going into executive session.
okay. All right. So the time is 11:31 and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy will be entering into executive session. Do I continue with those as authorized by ORS 192.6602 little f and or big L? In executive session, the board may consider information obtained as part of an investigation into the conduct of licensees or applicants, consider investigatory information and reports under ORS 676.165, or consider other information or records exempt from public inspection, including advice from the board's legal counsel. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state and general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, we will stop the recording. Anybody attending virtually will be placed in the waiting room. You're welcome to wait there until the board reconvenes into public session later. And anybody, there isn't anybody here physically, but asked to leave the room. Madam Chair, the next item on the agenda is motions as a result of executive session. Sarah, if you can advance the slide, please.
Ready?
Ready for motions?
In case number PT 944-02/26, I move to close the case and issue a confidential advisory letter.
I second the motion.
The motion has been first and seconded. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin?
Aye.
Mariah?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Hoku?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight?
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
In case number PT 949-03/26, I move to offer a settlement agreement with reprimand and notice to employer of the settlement agreement for violations of ORS 688.140 2J and OAR 848-045-0020 2B and C.
I second the motion.
Motion has been first and seconded. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin?
Aye.
Mariah?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Hoku?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight?
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
In case number PT 948-03/26, I move to issue notice of revocation for violations of ORS 688.140 to A and C, ORA 848-035-0030, or OAR 848-035-020, OAR 848-045-0020 to AIVA, capital A, capital B, capital E.
I second the motion.
Thank The motion has been first and seconded. Discussion?
I heard 03502.
One.
I just heard 0.
Okay. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin,
Aye.
Mariah,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight,
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
In case number PT 927-10/25, I move to close case.
I second the motion.
Motion has been first and seconded. Timothy, roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin,
Aye.
Mariah,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight,
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
In case number PT 908-05/25, I move to close case and issue a confidential advisory letter.
I second the motion.
Motion has been first and seconded. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin,
Aye.
Mariah,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight,
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
In case number PT 926-10/25, I move to close case.
I second the motion.
Motion has been first and seconded. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin,
Aye.
Mariah,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight,
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
I move to ratify the administrative closure of case PT 934-01/26.
I second the motion.
Motion has been first and seconded. Roll call vote. Timothy is excused. Erin,
Aye.
Mariah,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica is excused. Dwight,
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
And that concludes all the cases.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, for other business, in the earlier public session, there was a question with regard to the status of the bill related to the psilocybin program. I did reference the Oregon Legislature information system, and the current status on that bill is that it did pass both the House and Senate, inclusive of that provision in the omnibus bill that would add physical therapy and occupational therapy to the list of providers with that dual designation. It's been signed by both the House and Senate, and so it is on its way to the governor's desk for signature.
Thank you.
And with that, Madam Chair, we have no other business for today's agenda. So just to highlight before you adjourn that the next scheduled board meetings are listed here and available on the board's meetings web page, and the links are provided in the materials.
All right. So that's it. So the time is 2:22 and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is adjourned.